Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere, Chapter 20. A huge telephone pole floated by and slammed into the side of our house, and every one of us gasped. It was a wonder it didn't split the house right in half, and I almost got shook clean out of the dang boots. Cricket, she kept right on going with her performance, spinning faster than ever, looking like a cute circus dog entertaining an audience. The kids clapped along and went back to their laughing. Mama didn't think it was funny, and neither did Georgie or Daddy or me, but the sight of that puppy circling out of control gave me a heavy feeling of dread. The dog was spinning and yapping herself closer and closer to the edge of the roof, and Daddy was on his feet looking every bit as nervous as me, and my heart pounded faster. Georgie, grab her, I yelled. How stupid could he be? All he had to do was reach down and pick her up. I'm trying, he said in a high, squeaky voice, and he was walking with his legs spread hunched over right behind her with his hands held up, but the puppy was fast. Cricket, he kept saying, all nervous like, come here. He put his glasses that weren't pushed his glasses that weren't there up on his nose. Cricket was spinning herself silly. Georgie, just pick her up. I stopped my foot, and I was scared to move too fast, and I knew I had to get over there and grab the dog, and I took a few clumsy steps. Armani, Daddy hollered. At the exact time, Georgie yelled, Cricket! And Mama yelled, no! And I froze with my mouth hanging wide open and watched the sweet little cricket spin herself right off the edge of the roof. A split second later, a very small plop sound came from the water flowing no more than 12 inches from the top, and my hands flew up to my mouth. Georgie twisted his head around and looked at me. Our eyes locked down on each other, and I was fixing to tear him regarding how incredibly stupid he was. Then he blurted out, It's okay, Armani, I'll get her. Before any of us could scream no, the crazy boy jumped right off the roof. Chapter 21. Mama was wailing at the top of her lungs, and I could barely see the tiny speck of cricket bobbing out of the disgusting water, and it was flowing like an orange river, and my puppy had already floated far away. But it was my big brother who made the world stop spinning. The second Georgie landed in the gross water, he went completely under. His head popped up to the surface, and he swung his arms every which way, and he was in trouble. The water was taking him away from us so fast, he kept taking huge gulps of water into his mouth every time his head disappeared under the orangey, black, foamy water. Someone was screaming, Georgie, and then I realized it was me. Daddy stood on the edge of the roof, and his chest heaving in and out so fast it looked like he'd been running, and he turned and looked at Mama. Catherine, Daddy said softly. Mama slowly pulled her stare away from the water, and she closed her eyes. Tears were running down her face. Then he silently nodded his head yes, just one time. She opened her eyes and looked at Daddy with a sob. She whispered, I love you, George, and it was the first time I ever heard her call him by his first name. Daddy's eyes met mine just for the tiniest second. He never said a word, and then he jumped into the water. Chapter 22. Mama crumbled to her knees, and a long, deep cry poured from her heart out into the world. It was a sound that came from the place where all the deepest sadness gets stored up. There was no one in the entire world who was feeling more grief right then than Mama, and the sound of her heart breaking must have reached heaven, because just then it started to rain. Not hard, a soft rain, like tears sprinkling down on us. There was so much sadness coming from our rooftop, it had reached the angels, and they were crying too. The drizzling rain had stopped, and the sun was shining. The sky was perfectly blue, and the hurricane, come out of nowhere, changed everything, and then it was gone. I couldn't see a single living soul in any direction, but I could hear them. It was like we were alone in the new upside-down world. Left, just the five of us, alone with the sounds of suffering. Dog barks echoed all around us, and people screamed and wailed and shrieking, the kind of shrieking that makes the top of your head tingle with fear. I'd close my eyes and listen careful, hoping it might be Daddy or Georgie hollering for help, but it wasn't. The mesmerizing orange of the water was gone, and the dark ugliness of it was plain to see. The water was thick, black, alive. The smell got laid down on me and brought a shiver that ran along my bones. I sat on the roof in the clump of what was left of my family, me, Mama, our backs against each other, Kayla on my lap, and Mama held Colleen, and Celie lay by our side. The buzz of motorboats filled the air, and with that came more screams and shouts from people we couldn't see. We sat there and did nothing but swat flies, and we sat with Meemaw lying dead beneath us in a disgusting attic. We sat without Daddy and Georgie and my birthday puppy because they were gone, sucked away by the water monster, so we just sat. Celie jumped to her feet and pointed at the sky. Armani, do you see it? It didn't really feel like playing one of Celie's immature guessing games, and I definitely wasn't in no mood to be bothered, so I just said, mm-hmm. It kept staring the way Meemaw's boots caught the sun when I moved them just so. Mama had a grip on Celia's wrist, but the girl started waving at the sky with her free arm. Armani, look, it's a helicopter. I tore my eyes away from the boots and put my hands up over my eyes to block the glaring sun. And that's when I seen it. It was a helicopter. I practically tossed Kayla onto Mommy's crowded lap and jumped to my feet. Please stop, please stop, please stop, help us, please stop. My heart was racing and I went to bouncing on my tippy toes upside the boots, and I almost smiled, but I didn't. I was full of nervous and excited at the same time. Mom, it's going to be all right, Celie hollered. We're going to be rescued. Me and Celie jumped up and down, shouting and waving our arms at the approaching metal bird. Mama stood with the wings sitting between her twins sitting between her legs. She waved and hollered louder than I ever heard before. Over here, I have children, over here, and she stifled a whimper with her hand over her mouth. All of us, even the twins, were yelling and flapping our arms as it got closer. The wind coming off the thing made waves that slapped up against our house so hard it shook, and the helicopter was right above us. Celia was hollering about something, but I couldn't hear her on the account of the loud wop 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 of the helicopter blades twirling. 2,000 miles an hour, so it flew so low I thought I was going to take the top of our heads off. A man hanging at the side of the helicopter waved at us, and we waved back, smiling and jumping for joy. And then, just like that, the helicopter was gone. The pilot flying that thing flew right past us, like he sees families jumping and shouting on rooftops every day. I felt like we'd been punched in the belly. Celie whipped around big old puppy eyes, and they're coming back, aren't they, Mama? Mama stood there with her sorrowful eyes looking at the empty sky, and her whole face sagged. I fiddled with Meemaw's locket and took a deep breath. With an award-winning smile, I said, well, of course they're coming back. I just can't go landing on helicopters on people's roofs without permission, right, Mama? Mama looked at me, her eyes telling me I found the right words, so I kept going. They're most likely flying back to their headquarters right this very minute so they could get the go-ahead to fly back here and rescue the Curtis family. Watch, you'll see. Celia looked sideways at me. Are you sure they saw us? Mama took a step away from the twins and stepped closer to me, and she put an arm around my shoulder and kissed me lightly on the cheek. Of course they saw us, sweetheart, Mama said. Armani's right. There are procedures for things like this. They saw for themselves that we're fine, and they'll be back before you know it. Mama gave an award-winning smile, too. Celia let out a sigh. Well, that makes sense. She gave us one of her sunshiny smiles and said all bubbly, I can't wait to be rescued. She all but skipped back to her spot on the roof and pulled the journal out of her book sack. Mama hugged me and whispered in my ear, thank you. She went back to sitting with the kids, making sure no one moved from their spots, and I stood for a good bit staring into the murky water, wondering how long it takes for a person on a roof to die with no food and no water. I was fixing to sit back down when my family got a big old speckled dog came floating by. He was standing on top of one of them red and white coolers, just wagging his tail, letting out happy barks, like he was having a good time. He sailed right up on the side of our house, bounced off, then kept right on gliding by, taking the same exact path Daddy and Georgie had. Mama and Celie decided that since we were about to be rescued, we should try to clean ourselves up, and we took turns fixing each other's hair, and Mama tore the hem off her dress and tied the lime green headbands on Kyla and Kayleen, and it kept the sweat from running in their eyes. I almost felt normal. But then I'd hear a far off shout or sirens or a wop wop wop, and my brain would snap right back to the nightmare we were living in. I wished more than anything that Meemaw would have been there to hum us through the horrible time on the roof. Celia had her hands all up in Mama's hair, and I was looking at her across the nasty water, trying to count rooftops, when a yellow butterfly came by and landed right on the toe of my rubber boot. Kayla took a swat at it, but it stayed there, opening and closing its bright, perfect wings. I was fixing to ask how the little butterfly could survive a storm that had ruined everything else when I felt a bump against my house. Excuse me, ma'am. The voice came out of nowhere. Me, Mom, and Celia almost rolled right off the roof at the same time. Sitting there so close I could touch him with the stick was a big, burly white man in a teeny tiny boat. That's the end of chapter 22.